Welcome to BDO's Legal Tech Talk podcast. We're joined by judges and legal professionals to discuss emerging trends, regulatory updates, and the latest headlines. We'll provide tips to help your law firms and legal departments make the most out of legal technology.
Hi everyone, I'm Jared Crafton, BDO's Forensic Technology Practice Leader.
And I'm Daniel Gold, Forensics Principal and Leader of the eDiscovery Managed Services Practice.
Let's get started with this episode's exciting topic.
Welcome back to another episode of BDO Legal Tech Talk podcast. Jared, very excited to welcome to the virtual recording studio, Rich Robinson. And Jared, I don't know if you know this, but Rich and I go back well over a decade, and I think I just dated myself, Jared. I think that's what just happened.
Are you more than a decade old, Daniel?
Yeah. We've been in this business way too long. Rich Robinson, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Nice to meet you, Jared.
You as well.
It is good to have you here. Having known you for as long as I have, it is truly a delight to have you here, because one of the goals that Jared and I, are really looking for out of this recording here today is to really have all of our listeners kind of get an idea as to, understanding of, your thoughts on, technology execution and implementation inside of a legal department. But also, there's also a lot more to what you do, and what makes you so special, in my mind, at least, is that, your conversations around leadership and mentoring and professional growth, your posts on social media are fantastic, and really delighted to walk into this. But before we even get any place there, Rich, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about, who you are, where you work, what you do, and kind of set the stage for us.
I'm the Director of Legal Operations and Litigation Support for Toyota Motor North America. I've been there about 5 years and kind of wear two hats, right? On the one hand, the legal operations, legal technology, and then on the other, the e-discovery and litigation support side. Like I said, I've been there for 5 years. Prior to that, I was the Director of e-discovery and information governance for 7 years. So I was there dating back to about 2012. Prior to that, I spent a lot of time on the law firm side. It was mostly e-discovery, lit support, or even going all the way back to my help desk days at a law firm in Boston.
You have, for sure, covered the gamut
Yeah.
in legal, right?
I tell people I walked the dark side for a little bit. I spent a year on the e-discovery service provider space with your friends in Overland Park, Kansas.
That's right. That is definitely going a way back. And what's so fascinating is that you've been on the provider side, the law firm side, the IT side, the litigation support side, the legal operations side. There's really not a side you haven't seen here. And you've seen so many different profiles, if you will, and different people that you had to work with. I mean, if you were to, put a big headline around, some of your biggest lessons learned on how to work with people over the years, what does that look like?
If I'm being honest, I think it goes back to even predating my e-discovery and my law firm days, right? My degree is actually in psychology from Georgetown University, and I spent the first years after college, I ran a group home for troubled teens for 3 years. So I always tell people that was my training for dealing with attorneys, was working with angry adolescents. So but I learned a lot about concepts of therapy and counseling, like tabula rasa, being a blank slate. So I learned about emotional intelligence and about being able to hear what the problem is rather than what they're telling me the issue is, right? Not solving for specific issues, but solving for the actual root problem.
I find that your background absolutely fascinating, Rich, and just learn the part about the group home, obviously. And I'm married to a social worker, and I really credit my wife for a lot of my emotional development, of course, as a human being, but even professionally, just being able to come home and, run things by her. And then, of course, getting the perspective that, my corporate issues really generally aren't that big of a deal compared to the things that she's seen and done that day. But I'm curious, you have like a specific instance where, you were dealing in a tough situation with a client or provider or something, and you just kind of thought back to that group home and you're like, yes, I know how to handle this.
Certainly not that specific, right? Where I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I dealt with when in the group home, the kid was running away, right? Not so specific, but certainly those concepts, those ideas about how to be open and listen and engaged with the people that you're working with, right? I mean, I can't tell you the number of times especially early on in the career. And I feel like the industry has changed a lot where you don't run into as many attorneys who are screaming at front level workers. But that was the space that I grew up in, large law firms with partners and even associates who were just screaming at you because they had deadlines and you were not delivering data as quickly as they wanted, right? So walking into those scenarios with the mindset that I had from my counseling days really helped me through that, understanding that it wasn't me, right? I'm not the issue here. There's a bigger problem and I'm on your side. We're actually going to work through this together and get what you need. Those are concepts that I certainly brought from my background and my experience in the social work industry.
One of the concepts to that point, Rich, you and I have talked about is this concept of active listening. And you had some really great thoughts on this when we spoke about it a couple of years ago. And you're talking about the importance of active listening. And there's a level, if I recall right, there's a level of empathy that is required when you employ active listening. Can you explain in your words, active listening and also how that has helped played or contribute a role in some of your successes?
It all comes back to these interpersonal skills, right? Active listening is certainly one of them, emotional intelligence, collaboration and ingenuity and adaptability, resilience, all of these concepts that are underlying social skills, interpersonal skills. What I've referred to recently in LinkedIn and the conference that I'm about to present in New York City next week is legal power skills. Those are the heart or foundation of the skill set that we bring to the table that allows us to excel. And it's not just in the e-discovery space, it's not just in the legal ops space, it's not just as attorneys, right? It transcends all of those concepts, and it's true for everybody in every career, right? These are the things that help us move the needle in our careers. If you're able to communicate, if you're able to listen and speak to the issues that are near and dear to that person's heart, those are the ways that you're going to engage and influence. Leadership isn't about telling people what to do and when to do it. It's about being authentic and being trustworthy. It's about encouraging and allowing people to be the best versions of themselves, and everybody rises together, right?
I love this message. I mean, I think, you're hitting on so many concepts that both Daniel and I talk about all the time, and I feel like our listeners really connect with. I'm fascinated about the legal power skills. I certainly want to hear more about that, but it strikes me that in our industry, and really just in the world, right? I mean, some people, a lot of these things, it's very innate to, right? How to connect with other human beings, how to, build relationships, nurture relationships. And then for other folks, and, I don't mean to stereotype, I'm a technology person as well. I'm fairly introverted outside of this podcast. How do you build those skills? If you're just coming into the workforce or maybe your first job, how do you learn to do that in a professional setting where it's different than having friends, right?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And it's difficult to find in the industry. There are ways to find it. You can go on Google, you can go on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn Learning. Some larger organizations do a really good job of creating learning sites for their employees to engage, not just on the specifics, right? Like if you're a retail organization or an automotive organization, right? It's not just about the specifics of your job, but you might be able to engage in other learning activities that are outside about leadership, about communication. I tell people all the time, get on YouTube and just look up TED, right? TED and TEDx. There are so many fantastic 18-minute videos that will teach you about the art of storytelling. Simon Sinek and his Start With Why, right? I bring that up all the time because when you're trying to communicate and influence, whether you're trying to influence your leadership and steer them in a direction that you want leadership to go, or you're trying to get your team and your employees to move in a certain direction, starting with why is the right place, right? You've got to understand what their motivation is, what's their why, and then tell the story in a way that engages them on their level and encourages them to move forward.
You hit on probably my favorite author and also speaker. This is an audio recording, but Jared is laughing right now because Jared knows it's Simon's books behind me, and I talk about Start With Why all the time as well. So something else we have in common, Rich. And it's interesting. And for those, that are looking for a really good podcast on executive presence, I would recommend Amy Cuddy, her video as well. It's a bit of a tearjerker, or at least it was for me, I'll be honest. Definitely worth watching. There's a couple of things you said I want to come back to, Rich. One of them was about how the industry used to be about, attorneys as a generalization, screaming down the hallway, and I need this, right, et cetera. And then also talking about, people coming in and, learning these new skills. I think that there was a disruption that happened in the workforce, and that happened when the pandemic hit in 2020. And I think that disruption changed, I think, the way that we have interacted with one another. Jared talking about how, he's more of an introvert outside this podcast. And I think what we found was a lot of people became more introverted as well. Working in a legal department, working in legal operations, having to navigate multiple relationships internally, get champions internally, and you're on this great progression, you're doing well, and things are humming along, and then boom, the world shuts down, and you have this massive disruption. Rich, what do you do in those situations? I know you have written about this before, I've read it, but for those that haven't read your article, what do you do in those cases of disruption?
Fantastic question. I started the pandemic looking for reading material. I kind of blew through everything in a very short time. And so I went back and started reading a few things, and I read Stephen Covey, Who Moved My Cheese. I actually really thought about, could I rewrite this or rewrite a shorter version of it, Who Moved My Maze? Because everything that we were trying to accomplish was still the things that we were trying to accomplish. The cheese didn't move. Cheese didn't change. It's just that our entire paradigm for how we operated changed. And it was something that we in the industry, especially in legal technology, well, in all technology, I think, it moves so fast. We're used to change. We're used to disruption. We're used to innovation. Sometimes we have to tear down entire paradigms and build them back up. That was something completely different. So from a tech perspective, I felt like my reaction to it, and many others in the space, was just as you expect, right? We built a new paradigm for doing work remotely, and it worked. It worked well for as long as we needed it to. And now that paradigm is shifting back, and we're starting to see, certainly, law firms were early adopters of the going back into the office, right? A lot of law firms were almost too fast, maybe, that you'd hear some, as certainly a lot of the younger attorneys would say. But much of the rest of the industry, the world, has started to shift back to, and we're seeing more hybrid roles, more 3 days in and 2 days remote, and similar models, shying away from the fully remote model that some people have stuck with, but a lot of people have shifted back into at least some portion of it is in person. The tech isn't the issue, right? Dealing with the ways that we handle that, we've already figured all of that out. But now it's this interpersonal issue, how we become collaborators and good employees and good employers and good leaders in this space where there's this hybridization, and how do you re-engage when you got used to being remote for so long? I think a lot of people, and myself included, during the pandemic, when went fully remote, at the beginning, it's kind of nice, As an introvert myself, I enjoyed the ability. I felt more productive for a while because I was able to get all of my work done remotely. I never had a problem with not being able to do my work. My day flattened and spread a little bit, right? I got up earlier, or I started work earlier because I could roll out of bed and just be in the office. And I ended up working later, or actually going back to work later, after family went to bed, 9, 10 o'clock, it was easy to just slip back into the office and do some work. I was even more productive in my personal life because it was easy to take a lunch break and accomplish a few things in the house. Laundry wasn't a weekend thing anymore. It was I just do it on a Monday because I had a free 20 minutes to just throw a load in, right? So everything seemed to be working really well. But after a while, you start to notice that lack of personal interaction and the effect that it has on people and the effect that it has on the team. That serendipitous interaction in the office is so, so important. So once we went back into the office and I started bumping into people in the hallway and saying, I meant to ask you, have you got a chance to look at this, or did you do this, or can we talk about this later? 15-second, 30-second interactions were more powerful than me writing a 30-minute long email and then scheduling a 30-minute meeting that didn't need to be 30 minutes, but I had to block time on the calendar to get it done. All of that to say, we're still in this mode, right? We're still trying to redevelop a paradigm that works where you get that personal interaction and you get that distance and the ability to work from home that has been so productive and helpful for a lot of people.
Legal teams are struggling to manage resources, maintain compliance, and adopt new technologies. BDO's legal operations team can help. We enhance efficiency, reduce costs, and support compliance so you can run your legal department like a business. Schedule a meeting with us today at BDO.com.
Your journey sounds very familiar. I think a lot of us, really went through, very similar things. And we're all kind of in different stages of coming out of that right now. And I know the three of us, personally very much believe in, a model of continual personal improvement. And, we're always working on ourselves and reading and taking feedback and trying to get better. And I know you work for an organization that really has a corporate strategy around continuous improvement, Kaizen. And so I was kind of curious, hearing your story personally, because I know my journey, which was similar, and everything that I was kind of working on to help me with that kind of flexibility to adapt to the changing conditions. Could you take a minute and just kind of tell us, how an organizational strategy around continuous improvement, helped you with flexibility, for your organization?
Yeah, the concept of Kaizen, or continuous improvement, has been an integral part of developing how I approach situations, both personally and professionally. I think that one of the things that you learn, it's the lean concept, right? Six Sigma, take these courses and you'll learn about Kaizen and about Muda and eliminating waste and all of these concepts that are part of that, right? One of the things that you learn is that in order to Kaizen, you need to map your process, right? You need to understand all the steps that are involved in getting from A to Z, right? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What are you trying to improve? Improvement or innovation for the sake of innovation is, I think, a mistake that a lot of organizations make. They think that they need to be innovative, especially as we're approaching this area where AI and generative AI and LLMs are becoming so omnipresent in the industry. There's this danger of people saying, I need that. Bring that into our organization, or do something that uses LLM just so that we can say we're using LLM, right? But the key is to map your process and understand all the steps in the process and understand where can you make improvement that has the greatest impact on the result. Sometimes it is technology. A lot of times it's just a change in the process or a change in the people that are involved in the process. There are two forms of innovation. Well, there are multiples, but I usually break it down into the two primary ones, which I feel are sustaining innovation and disruptive innovation, right? And disruptive is when you tear down something and you put something in its place that completely changes the way that you approach a situation and makes it hopefully a lot better. But sustaining innovation, that's what we do every day, is we just look at a process that we're doing and figure out, is there some small change that we can make? Is there a little tweak in that process or in that technology? Can I add some sort of automation to it, or add AI into that process, or add some new web-based or SaaS technology into that process to make it just that much incrementally better? Maybe save some of my people from doing tedious administrative work and free them up to do more meaningful work, right? That's the key. That's what we're trying to do most of the time. And so I think that that's where I try to approach my career and my personal life. That's the innovation that I'm looking for on a daily basis, is what small change can I make that is just going to make everybody, my life and the life of the people around me, just a little bit better.
For those that are aware of the innovation curve, there's the laggards, right? And then there's the early adopters. The name of the actual innovation curve is actually escaping me at the moment. But, when you're talking about the two different kinds of innovation, you're talking about legal teams. The legal teams are on the laggard side, right? We're not often, they'd be the early adopters. And yet what's so fascinating, and you brought it up, I thought we'd escape an entire podcast episode without talking about LLMs or generative AI, but it's interesting. So what is your opinion on why it is that for an industry that have historically, generally speaking, been known as being laggards, right? We take a look about some history. We talk about technology assisted reviews as one very good example, being laggards to this. But yet with generative AI and LLMs, it's what you said, Rich. It's like, we have to have it just so we can say we've got it. Why the switch all of a sudden though, Rich?
It's an excellent question. I think that in some respects, attorneys see themselves as artists in a way. They're creatives, right? And they've been somewhat hesitant over the years. Like, we knew that, back in 2012, when the RAND study told us that TAR was more effective than manual document review by trained attorneys. 12 years later, we're still doing linear document review by attorneys. It doesn't matter. They refuse to give up that goat, right? But somehow generative AI comes on the scene and they're like, well, we've got to have that. And suddenly you've got attorneys that are submitting pleadings written entirely by ChatGPT and getting their hands slapped in court and blaming their paralegals for doing it, right? There's a piece of that where I don't know if I get many attorneys to say that they're artists, or creatives, but it is like writing content as an attorney is something that computers couldn't really do very well in the past. And suddenly the understanding of language and the creation of language, these are things that lawyers are particularly very good at. That's what their training is about, is understanding, breaking down, complex content and then being able to summarize. So I think it's encroaching on the space more than it ever has before. But I do still think that we're probably, I want to say that we're close to a decade away. It might be less than that. It might be, maybe 4 or 6 years away from truly being able to incorporate LLM, generative AI, into the process in a truly meaningful way. I think it's good supplementary. I can definitely see use cases already for it, but truly bringing it into the process in a meaningful way, I think we're a few years away from that being accomplished.
It's the topic du jour, right? I
mean, for sure it is.
I'm sure you saw the smiles on Daniel and my faces when you were talking about innovating for the sake of innovation, and then mentioned generative AI, because it comes up every day with our clients, right? And everybody wants to know about it, what they can do, and it is super powerful. And I generally agree with you. It's going to be a while. I think the use case I'm most excited about these days is just making complex data analyses accessible to people through language, right? And we're still a little way away from really making that a true reality, but that is truly, truly powerful. I think if you can bring, complex analyses in some of these cases and just be able to interact with them like a human being, I think that's great. I'm curious, what other trends you see the next 4 to 6 years? I mean, I think you succinctly told us your thoughts on Gen AI, but anything out there else that you think is, disruptive or is really going to change the game?
Like I said, I am not one to be looking for disruption. I tend to be very skeptical of technology that is going to change the game. I do think Gen AI is going to change the game. I think that we're in an inflection point from a technology standpoint. I just don't think they've figured out how to do it yet in a truly meaningful way. I think that's the tech that is going to change all the tech. Outside of that, it's mostly sustaining innovation, right? It's taking existing technology and tweaking it, just making it a little bit better and more usable.
Rich, the topics that we've covered on this podcast today, talking about active listening, emotional intelligence, executive presence, and then also, other areas like looking at mapping appropriate processes with people, maybe not always looking at technology first. These are all the reasons why we wanted to have you on the podcast recording here today. This has been really very grateful to you, Rich, for your expertise, for your knowledge, and for being so generous with your time and coming on here today. Rich Robinson, thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Thank you, Daniel and Jared. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. I love seeing it go in different directions and following it wherever it went. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us on BDO's Legal Tech Talk podcast.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe for more episodes.
Head over to BDO.com for a list of all of our episodes, transcripts, resources, and how to get in touch with us to continue the conversation.
Until next time, this has been another episode of BDO's Legal Tech Talk.